The wind rolled low across the plains that evening, carrying the scent of rain and dust over miles of empty land. The sun was sinking behind the distant hills, turning the sky into a long ribbon of red and gold. A lone rider appeared on the horizon, his shadow stretching wide over the earth. His horse moved slow and steady, hooves crunching on the dry soil of the old trail that led toward a forgotten village, a place once alive with laughter and music, now silent as a graveyard. The man's hat was pulled low, his coat dark with the dust of travel, and his eyes, hidden beneath the brim, held a weight that only years of regret could give. He was coming home, or what was left of it. The town of Dry Creek had once been the pride of the frontier, a small American settlement carved out of the wildland sometime before the railroad came. There had been a church, a saloon, a trading post, and a few dozen wooden homes scattered around the dusty main road. But after the war and the Apache raids, the town faded, its people gone to safer places. Only the wind stayed behind to whisper through the cracks of old fences and swing the doors that no one walked through anymore. The rider, known to most only as the Cowboy, had been gone for nearly 10 years. He had left a boy chasing dreams of gold and glory and returned a man carrying ghosts. He'd fought under men he couldn't respect, seen friends buried in shallow graves, and watched too many sunsets alone with no one to call his name. But now, there was something that had pulled him back across those lonely miles, something deeper than revenge, though revenge had been his first reason. There was an old promise made long ago under the cottonwoods by the river, one he'd almost forgotten until he saw that same river again in his dreams. As he rode into Dry Creek, his horse gave a soft whinny. The town looked smaller than he remembered, the wooden storefronts worn and gray. The sign above the saloon creaked in the wind, half broken, the paint faded to ghostly letters. He dismounted slowly, his boots striking the ground with a heavy sound, and tied his horse to the hitching post. From his saddlebag, he drew a small canteen and took a long drink, watching the dust swirl around his feet. For a moment he felt like a stranger stepping into his own past. Then came a sound. A faint melody carried on the wind, a woman's voice, soft but clear, singing a tune that once belonged to the summer nights of his boyhood. He froze, the canteen slipping slightly in his hand. It couldn't be. That song had belonged to her, the girl from the river, the one with the dark braids and eyes like twilight after rain. The Apache girl who used to meet him by the old cottonwood tree, long before the townfolk warned him to stay away. The one who vanished the same week the soldiers came. He turned toward the sound, heart beating faster than he cared to admit. The song faded, replaced by silence and the low rumble of thunder far off in the hills. He walked down the street, boots echoing, passing shuttered windows and sagging porches. The smell of rain grew stronger, mingled with the faint smoke of a nearby fire. And then he saw her. She stood at the edge of town, half hidden by the shadow of an old barn, her figure outlined by the dying light. Her dress was simple, woven with the patterns of her people, and her hair, long and dark, was tied loosely behind her shoulders. She looked like a ghost at first, someone from another world entirely. But when she stepped forward, her face caught the light, and the years fell away in an instant. "Cowboy," she said softly, her voice trembling like a string on a fiddle. "Don't you remember me?" He didn't speak. Couldn't, really. The name he'd once called her sat heavy on his tongue, but he was afraid that if he said it, the moment would vanish. She smiled faintly, though her eyes told a story of pain and endurance. "I am your childhood love," she whispered, her hand touching the old scar on his cheek as if to be sure he was real. "The one you left by the river." The wind caught her words and carried them off across the empty fields. The cowboy's throat tightened. He remembered everything then, the secret meetings, the laughter, the way she used to braid wildflowers into his horse's mane. And he remembered the day the soldiers came, claiming the Apache had raided a nearby ranch. He'd wanted to defend her people, but he was just a boy, powerless against the men who saw the world only in terms of sides and enemies. When the smoke cleared, the river had run red, and she was gone. He had believed her dead. For 10 years, now she stood before him, older but still beautiful, her spirit unbroken. "You shouldn't have come back," she said suddenly, her tone changing. "This land isn't safe for you anymore." "I came for answers," he replied, his voice low. "And for the truth." "The truth won't bring peace," she said. "It'll only bring more blood." Thunder cracked across the plains, startling the horses tethered nearby. The rain began to fall, slow at first, then steady, washing the dust from the wooden boards and turning the air cold. The cowboy's hat dripped as he watched her, trying to read the storm in her eyes. Something in her gaze told him she knew more than she would say. Something about the past he had never understood. "Tell me what happened," he said finally. She looked away, toward the hills where the lightning flashed. "You wouldn't believe me if I did. Try me." For a moment she hesitated. Then she stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. "They think you killed him," she said quietly. "The man who led the raid. They think you were the one who betrayed both sides." The cowboy's jaw tightened. "That's a lie." "I know," she whispered. "But the others, they don't. And if they find out you're here, you won't live to see another sunrise." He felt the air grow heavier, the weight of her words pressing on him like the rain-soaked clouds above. "Then why tell me?" he asked. "Because," she said, her voice trembling, "I still remember you, and I couldn't let them take you again." Lightning lit the sky, and for an instant her face looked almost ethereal. Half angel, half warrior. Then she turned and began to walk away, her silhouette fading into the rain. "Wait," he called after her. She stopped but didn't turn around. "Go back," she said softly. "Forget you ever saw me. You know I can't do that." She was silent for a long moment, then spoke, almost to herself. "Then you'll die like the rest." The words chilled him more than the rain. He wanted to follow her, to ask what she meant. But something in the darkness between them warned him not to. The storm grew louder, the wind howling down the street like a wild beast. He watched as she disappeared into the night, leaving him alone in the ghost town that once was his home. And as the thunder rolled over the land, he realized something he hadn't before. Whatever truth he had come seeking wasn't buried in the dust of Dry Creek. It was alive, walking out there in the shadows, wearing the face of the woman he once loved. The cowboy pulled his hat low again and looked toward the hills where she had gone. The storm was moving that way, and so would he. But he didn't see the figure watching him from the far end of the street, standing in the rain beside an old wagon. The glint of a rifle barrel caught the faint light, the sound of thunder, covered the click of the hammer being drawn back. Rain poured through the cracks of the old rooftops as the cowboy stood in the center of the street, staring into the darkness where she had vanished. He didn't move for a long while, just listened to the sound of water hitting the boards and the faint creak of swinging signs in the wind. His heart thudded like a drum inside his chest. Somewhere out there beyond the fields lay answers, truths buried beneath years of silence. But now he also knew there were eyes watching him, waiting for his next step. The horse shifted restlessly beside him, ears flicking toward the far end of town where the rifle had glinted a moment ago. The cowboy turned his head slightly, pretending not to notice. If someone was following him, he wasn't about to make it easy for them. He tugged the reins, mounted his horse, and guided it slowly down the muddy road, the rain falling harder by the minute. Every sound was sharper in the downpour, the horse's breathing, the slap of water under its hooves, the distant roll of thunder. He stopped at the old livery stable near the edge of town, the same one he'd known as a boy. The roof sagged, the windows were broken, but it still smelled faintly of hay and leather. He led his horse inside and lit a small lantern he'd kept in his saddlebag. The flickering light threw shadows across the walls, making the place feel alive again. He removed his coat, heavy with rain, and hung it on a rusty nail. His fingers brushed against a mark carved deep into one of the wooden beams. It was small, barely visible in the dim light, a circle with 2 lines crossing through it. He froze. That mark had been theirs, his and hers, a sign they'd made as children to mark their meeting place. It hit him like a punch. She'd been here recently. He crouched beside the beam, tracing the lines with his hand. The wood felt fresh, recently cut. Maybe she'd left it for him to find. But why? And what did she mean when she said they thought he had killed that man? The raid, the fire, the years of blame. None of it had made sense before. Now it did, at least partly. Someone had twisted the truth, and whoever that someone was, they didn't want him coming back to uncover it. He heard a soft sound behind him. Not thunder, not wind. Something heavier, a boot scuffing against the floor. His hand went to the gun on his belt before he turned. A shadow moved near the doorway. The light from the lantern caught a man's face, half hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He looked older, rougher, with a gray beard and a scar running down one side of his jaw. His hand rested on the rifle slung across his chest. "Thought that was you," the man said, his voice calm but cold. "Didn't reckon you'd come back to this ghost town." The cowboy didn't lower his hand. "Depends who's asking." The stranger stepped closer, rain dripping from his hat brim. "Name's Hale. Sheriff Hale now, though I reckon that don't mean much out here." Not many folks left to keep law over. The cowboy's eyes narrowed. You were just a deputy when I left. Times change, Hale said. Some folks moved on. Some didn't make it. And some, like you, show up after 10 years of silence bringing trouble on the wind. The cowboy stared at him. You always did like your speeches, Sheriff. What do you want? To know why you're back, Hale said, lowering his rifle slightly but not enough to be friendly. Word is you're asking about the old raid. Some wounds don't need reopening. Those wounds never closed, the cowboy said quietly. Not for me, Hale's gaze hardened. You should have stayed gone. There's folks who still remember what they think happened. And the Apache haven't forgotten either. I saw her, the cowboy said suddenly. By the barn. For a moment, Hale didn't answer. Then he gave a slow shake of his head. You didn't see her. I did, the cowboy insisted. She's alive. That's impossible, Hale said, his tone low and sharp. She died that night. Everyone knows it, the cowboy stepped forward. I tell you I saw her. She spoke to me. Hale's expression flickered, something between disbelief and fear. Then you best ride out while you still can. If she's truly back, it means the past ain't done with any of us. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle outside. The sheriff gave one last look before walking out into the mist, his boots splashing through puddles. The cowboy watched him go, the door swinging slowly shut behind him. He sat down on an overturned crate, staring at the carved mark on the beam again. So the sheriff wanted him gone. That told him plenty. There was more to that raid than anyone had ever said. When he was a boy, the Apache had come to trade, and sometimes to sing near the river. His father used to say the land didn't belong to anyone. It was shared. But greed and fear changed all that. The settlers wanted more. The army wanted control. And the peace his people had once known cracked like thin ice under too much weight. And then came that night. The raid. Smoke rising from cabins, gunshots echoing through the trees, and him, just a boy, running toward the river where she had promised to meet him. He never found her. Only the burning remains of what used to be her camp. They'd told him she was dead, that her people had turned violent and that she had been part of it. But he'd never believed that. Now, seeing her alive again, it changed everything. He left the stable before dawn. The sky was gray, and the air smelled of wet sagebrush. The plains stretched endless before him, and somewhere beyond those hills was her trail. He knew she didn't want him following, but he couldn't stop now. He needed to know the truth. Why she'd disappeared, why she'd warned him, and who had set him up all those years ago. He followed the old trail that led toward the Apache lands, where the river bent through the valley like a silver snake. The ride was long and silent, except for the sound of the horse's hooves against soft earth. The deeper he went, the more he felt the old memories creeping back. The laughter by the water, her voice calling his name, the taste of wild berries they used to steal from the bushes along the ridge. By midday, he reached the riverbank. The cottonwood tree still stood, older but strong, its roots deep in the soil. Beneath it, someone had built a small fire pit, the ashes still warm. He dismounted, crouched down, and touched them with his fingertips. She'd been here maybe hours ago. A movement across the water caught his eye. A rider moving fast through the trees. He stepped behind the trunk of the cottonwood and watched. The rider was small, light, perhaps a woman, and her horse bore the same woven blanket he remembered from the night before. Wait, he called, stepping out. The rider stopped, turned, and for a heartbeat, he thought she would come closer. But then she pulled the reins hard and disappeared into the thicket, the sound of hooves fading into the distance. He exhaled sharply, anger and longing twisting inside him. Why was she running? What was she afraid of? He crossed the river, his boots sinking into the soft ground. The forest on the other side was dense and quiet, filled with the smell of pine and damp earth. He followed her trail until the sun began to sink again, painting the world in shades of orange and gray. Then he heard voices. He moved closer, careful not to make a sound. Ahead, through the trees, he saw the glow of a campfire and 3 men sitting around it. They weren't Apache. They were white men, rough, hard-looking, the kind who lived by the gun. He recognized one of them, Clay, a ranch hand from years back. He strained to listen. The sheriff says he's here, one man was saying. He wants him gone by tomorrow. Said to make it look like an accident? Yeah, Clay replied, spitting into the fire. If he's still breathing come sunrise, we failed our job. The cowboy's stomach turned cold. So the sheriff had lied. He wasn't just warning him to leave. He'd sent killers to finish what had been started long ago. He stepped back quietly, heart pounding. One twig cracked under his boot. All three men turned at once. "Who's there?" Clay shouted, reaching for his gun. The cowboy ran for the trees, ducking low as a bullet tore through the branches above him. The forest came alive with echoes of gunfire and shouting. He moved fast, slipping through the shadows, his mind racing. There was no mistaking it now. The truth was dangerous. Someone had killed to keep it buried, and now they wanted him next. He reached a narrow ridge and dropped to the ground, catching his breath. The night air was cold, sharp against his lungs. Far below, the campfire flickered, and the men's voices grew faint. For the first time, he realized how deep this ran. The sheriff, the raid, the woman, everything was tied together. Somewhere in the dark, an owl called, and from the shadows behind him, a quiet voice said, "You should have listened when I told you to leave." He turned, his hand reaching for his gun, but she was already there. The Apache beauty, her eyes fierce in the moonlight, and she wasn't alone. Beneath it, someone had left a woven charm hanging from a low branch, 2 feathers tied with red thread, and a smooth river stone at the center. He reached up and took it in his hand, feeling the faint warmth of the thread as though it had just been tied. He knew what it meant, a warning, or perhaps a message only the two of them would understand. Before he could think more on it, she spoke behind him again, her voice calm but edged with something hard. "You shouldn't have come this far." He turned slowly. The Apache beauty stood a few paces away, her dark hair wet from the river mist, her bow slung across her shoulder. But this time she wasn't alone. 2 other figures stepped out from behind the trees. Both men, both watching him closely. Their faces were painted, their expressions unreadable. He lowered his hand, showing he meant no harm. "I just want to talk," he said quietly. She studied him for a long time, then nodded to one of the men. "Search him!" The man stepped forward, his movements quick and silent. He took the cowboy's revolver and knife, tossing them aside before stepping back. The cowboy didn't resist. He knew better than to try. When she finally spoke again, her tone had softened. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "You were warned." "I came because I need answers," he replied. "About that night. About what really happened." Her eyes flicked toward the river where the current moved slow and steady. "You still don't understand. The men who came that night weren't my people. They wore our paint, but they weren't us. It was a trap. Someone wanted both sides to fight." The words struck him like lightning. "A trap?" She nodded. "The same men who burned our camp blamed it on us to start a war. The settlers fought back and many on both sides died. Your father was one of the few who tried to stop it." The cowboy felt the air leave his lungs. He hadn't known that. Nobody had told him his father tried to protect the Apache that night. They'd told him his father was killed by them. The truth twisted everything he thought he knew. "Who were they?" he asked. "Men working for the army, for the rail company," she said. "They wanted this land. They needed an excuse to drive us away. And they used you, your family, and me to do it." The sound of the river filled the silence between them. The other 2 Apache men exchanged glances but said nothing. She took a step closer, her eyes fixed on his. "If you go back to Dry Creek, they'll kill you. Sheriff Hale isn't protecting you. He's protecting them." He thought back to the night before, the sheriff's warning, the men around the fire, the bullets in the dark. She was right. Every piece fit. "Then why did you stay here?" he asked. "Why didn't you leave?" Her jaw tightened. "Because my people have nowhere else to go. This is still our land, even if they've forgotten it." He looked at her, really looked. The girl he'd known had become a woman shaped by loss and fire, but her spirit hadn't broken. "Let me help," he said. She shook her head. "You can't. You're one of them, whether you like it or not. If you help me, they'll come after both of us." He opened his mouth to argue, but a sudden sound cut him off, a low rumble of hooves coming from the distance. She turned toward it sharply, eyes narrowing. "They found you," she whispered. "Get down!" One of the men shouted. Gunfire cracked through the trees. The cowboy dove behind a fallen log as bullets tore through the leaves. The Apache men returned fire with arrows, their shots quick and sure. The air filled with smoke and shouting. He grabbed his revolver from the ground where it had been thrown and fired back, catching sight of 2 riders in army coats pushing through the trees. He recognized one of them immediately. Clay, the man from the campfire, the sheriff's hired gun. The fight didn't last long. Outnumbered, the attackers retreated toward the ridge, their horses kicking up mud as they fled. But the damage was done. One of the Apache men lay still, an arrow broken beside him. The woman knelt by his side, her face pale with sorrow. When she stood, her eyes were cold as stone. "Now do you see?" she said. "They'll stop at nothing." The cowboy nodded, breathing hard. "Then we fight them together." "You don't understand," she said. "This isn't just about revenge. It's about survival." He looked down at the man who had fallen, then back toward the hills where the riders had gone. "Then we start with the sheriff," he said quietly. "He's the key." She hesitated, then gave a slow nod. "If you go after him, you'll need proof. And you'll need allies. Where do I find them?" She looked toward the west, where the sky was turning gray with approaching storm clouds. "There's a place in the canyon, a camp of those who still remember the truth. They've been hiding since the war ended. I'll take you there. But once you see what's hidden, there's no going back." He met her gaze. "I already crossed that line." They rode together through the valley, the land stretching wide and open around them. The rain returned, soft and steady, washing away the blood but not the weight of what had happened. As they traveled, she told him pieces of the story, the bribes paid by the rail company, the soldiers ordered to provoke the Apache, the false reports sent to Washington claiming peace had failed. It all made sense now. Hale hadn't been trying to keep peace. He'd been part of the machine that destroyed it. By nightfall, they reached the canyon, a narrow cut in the land where the rocks glowed red in the fading light. She led him down a winding path to a hidden hollow surrounded by cottonwoods. Fires burned low inside, and faces turned to watch them as they entered. Men, women, and children, Apache survivors and a few settlers who had stayed loyal to them. One of the older men stepped forward, his hair silver, his eyes sharp. "Why have you brought him here?" "He was there that night," she said simply. "He was a boy then. Now he wants the truth." The man studied him for a long moment, then motioned for him to sit by the fire. The cowboy obeyed, feeling every stare on his back. The elder spoke slowly. "You seek truth, but truth is heavy. Once you carry it, it never leaves you." "I need to know who killed my father," the cowboy said. "And who blamed her people for it," the elder nodded. "Then listen." He told the story of a secret deal between the army and the railroad men, how gold had been found near the Apache lands, and how they'd used fear to clear the territory. The attack that night had been staged, Apache paint on white men's faces, torches lit to spark revenge, and when the smoke cleared, the land was claimed, and those who questioned it were silenced. The cowboy sat in stunned silence. Every memory, every belief he'd carried crumbled inside him. When the elder finished, he leaned forward. "The sheriff was a part of it," he said. "But there's more. The one who led the false raid is still alive. And he's coming back." "Who?" the cowboy asked. The elder's gaze darkened. "You'll know soon enough. But if you mean to fight, you must be ready for what comes. This land won't forgive easily." That night, as the fire crackled and the others drifted to sleep, the cowboy sat alone beneath the stars. She sat beside him, silent, her hands clasped around the small charm she'd made. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. She looked toward the dark horizon. "Now we wait. The storm is coming." Somewhere in the distance, lightning flashed across the plains, bright enough to show the shape of riders moving against the night. The cowboy stood, heart tightening as he watched them. They were too many to count. The wind carried the echo of hooves, closer with every second. The storm had already begun. Beneath the firelight, the cowboy could see every line etched into the elder's face, the years of watching, of surviving, of guarding secrets that could burn a man alive if revealed. The elder's eyes didn't soften as they usually did with newcomers. Instead, they held the weight of warning. "You'll need to understand something before you act," the elder said slowly. "This isn't a fight you win with just your gun. Every step you take here will stir shadows older than you can imagine." The cowboy swallowed hard, feeling the truth of the words settle into his chest. He had never feared a man or a gun, not until now, not with everything he had learned tonight, with the past stretching its claws into the present. "We've been waiting," the Apache beauty said quietly, her voice almost lost under the soft crackle of the fire. "Waiting for someone who would stand for the truth, someone who can see through the lies." He looked at her, searching for the girl he had known so long ago. Instead, he saw a warrior, shaped by years of loss and hardened by betrayal. He wanted to tell her he remembered. He still loved her, but now wasn't the time. The danger pressing down around them left no room for sentiment. "Where do we start?" he asked, voice low. The elder gestured toward a rough map sketched into the dirt with a stick. Hale, he said, pointing to a crude mark near the town's edge, controls the roads. Clay and his men run the ridge patrols. They are the shield for the ones who orchestrated the raid. The cowboy traced the lines with his finger. And the ones who set the trap 10 years ago. They've grown rich hidden behind fences and contracts, the elder said. They believe their secret's safe. But the river remembers. The land remembers. And so do we. A shadow moved along the fire's edge, and he turned to see a young Apache boy, barely older than he had been that night, watching him with wide eyes. The boy carried a small bundle of arrows. He's brave, the girl whispered. Like you once were, he didn't answer. Bravery alone wouldn't be enough. They needed strategy, allies, information, and timing. Each piece had to fit perfectly, or they would all die. And as he considered the risks, he couldn't shake the image of the riders from the night before. They're cold. Calculated movements, the glint of gunmetal, the merciless look in Clay's eyes. The night passed with tense silence. He barely slept, listening to the wind whistling through the canyon, the soft murmur of the river, the occasional shift of figures in the camp. Everyone here carried a story, a reason to fight, a reason to hide. But for him, the fight was personal now. Every unanswered question, every lie told, every betrayal felt like fire under his skin. At dawn, they set out. The Apache beauty led him up a narrow trail that hugged the cliffs, the rising sun painting the rocks in gold and red. Birds scattered into the sky as they approached the first ridge. From this height, the town of Dry Creek seemed smaller, diminished, almost peaceful, but he knew better. Danger waited in every shadow, every wind gust, every turn in the road. Patrols, she whispered, pointing to the glint of steel in the distance. They know someone is coming. We move carefully or we die. The cowboy nodded. His hand rested on the revolver at his side, ready but cautious. The adrenaline in his veins coiled like a spring. One wrong step, one misjudged turn, and years of preparation. All the trust he had built tonight would be wasted. They skirted the edges of the town, using the shadows of abandoned barns and crumbling fences for cover. Every sound, dog barking in the distance, a plank creaking, a metal lid tumbling, made him flinch. He could almost feel Hale's eyes on them, watching, calculating, waiting for them to slip. Hours passed, each movement slow and deliberate. They paused near the river's bend, hiding behind dense willows. From this vantage they could see smoke rising from the edge of town, the faint silhouettes of men moving in patrols. Hale was there somewhere, orchestrating everything like a spider at the center of his web. She's planning to strike tonight, the cowboy said, more to himself than anyone else. But we need a plan. The Apache beauty gave him a measured look. We strike when they least expect it. They will assume we are afraid, hiding. But if we wait for the right moment, we can force them to reveal themselves. He studied the river, the canyon, the approach to Dry Creek. Every path, every slope, every ridge could be used against them, or for them. The more he observed, the more he understood why the elders trusted him. He had learned the land as a boy, and now it was as if the land itself whispered strategy into his mind. They moved closer to the town as dusk fell. The patrols shifted, silhouetted against the red-orange sky. Every nerve in his body was alert. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle a warning. The canyon grew darker, the river louder, the wind sharper. And then they saw it. Hale's riders converging on the main road, a small but deliberate force, clearly expecting trouble. Clay and his men flanked them, ready to cut off anyone who tried to leave or enter. The cowboy felt the weight of the moment pressing down. This was it, the edge before the leap, the moment before all their moves collided with the enemy. One false step, one misjudged shot, one betrayal, and they would fall. Stay close, the Apache beauty whispered. Once it begins, there's no turning back. They crouched among the rocks, watching, waiting. The patrols moved like clockwork, every man alert, every horse restless. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and earth, carrying the faint tang of gunpowder from previous skirmishes. He thought about the past, the raid, the fire, the lies, the years of silence. About her, standing fierce and determined beside him, carrying the memory of their childhood, the pain of their people, the hope that justice could still be taken. A distant flash of movement caught his eye, Clay stepping from cover, signaling to someone deeper in town. The plan was in motion. He exhaled slowly, letting his body tense, ready for action. He felt her hand on his arm, grounding him, reminding him that they were in this together. The patrols drew closer to the river crossing, the narrowest point of the canyon path. This was their chance, ambush or counter, strike or retreat. Every arrow, every bullet, every decision in the next few moments would tip the scale. The sky darkened further, storm clouds rolling in. The first rumble of distant thunder vibrated through the canyon walls. It was as though the land itself was warning them, nature echoing the tension in the air. He could see Hale now, tall in his saddle, overseeing his men. The sheriff's eyes scanned the horizon, not knowing that the hunter had become the hunted. The Apache beauty leaned close. "When the first shot is fired, there's no turning back," she said. "Everyone will know who stands with truth and who stands with lies." The cowboy nodded. He gripped his revolver, checked his arrows, and took one last deep breath. The storm above mirrored the storm below, dark, wild, inevitable. From behind the rocks, he saw movement on both sides, the other survivors readying themselves, their faces shadowed, their expressions grim. Children had been moved further back. Elders were watching quietly, and a few of the young warriors adjusted their weapons. Every muscle taut, the wind carried the scent of rain, smoke, and gunpowder. And then, a horn sounded from the ridge. The cavalry was coming faster than expected, Hale's men charging in waves, forcing their way toward the canyon. The cowboy exchanged a look with her. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Every second now counted. The confrontation was coming. The past and present, lies and truths, vengeance and survival. They were about to collide in one violent, unforgiving storm. Every heartbeat thudded in his ears. Every rustle, every shadow, every echo of the river seemed to stretch time into eternity. He raised his head, scanning the ridge. The Apache beauty did the same, and then the first shot rang out. The canyon erupted. The storm above broke with a flash of lightning, and rain fell in sheets, soaking everyone in its fury. The battle had begun. And in that instant he realized that nothing would ever be the same again. "He was there that night," she said simply. "He was a boy then. Now he wants the truth." The elder studied him for a long moment, the firelight reflecting in his eyes like it carried centuries of memory. "Then you will have it," he said finally. "But understand, the truth will not come gently. It may burn and it may hurt, and it may change everything you thought you knew." The cowboy nodded. He had already learned enough to know that nothing in this land was simple. He sat down by the fire, the warmth of the flames pushing back against the chill of the night. Around him, faces reflected a mixture of hope, caution, and wary expectation. They had all survived horrors no outsider could imagine. Yet their trust in him, someone who had once belonged to the side that caused so much pain, was tentative but real. The elder began, voice low and deliberate. He spoke of the plans that had been hidden in plain sight for years, of how the rail company had bribed officials to take land, of soldiers disguised in Apache paint to provoke conflict, and of lies that had been told to cover up greed and betrayal. Each sentence drew the cowboy deeper into a past he had only glimpsed in fragments. He understood now why the sheriff had always been suspicious of outsiders, and why the Apache beauty had warned him so fiercely. "They believed all would forget," the elder said, eyes locking on the cowboy. "But land remembers, rivers remember, and people remember too." The Apache beauty reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We survived because we knew what we were fighting for. You survived because you refused to forget. Now it is time to make sure they remember the truth as well." Dawn broke slowly over the canyon. The sky blushed with streaks of gold and rose. The cowboy, the woman, and their allies gathered their weapons quietly, hearts steady but minds tense. There would be no mercy for those who had tried to bury the past. They moved as one toward Dry Creek, every step measured, every glance scanning the horizon. The town itself lay quiet, abandoned in parts, the remnants of the old buildings standing as silent witnesses to decades of lies and betrayal. Hale's patrols were fewer than expected, scattered across predictable routes. They had been confident, and that confidence would be their undoing. The cowboy and the Apache beauty led the group through hidden trails, approaching Hale's main position near the old saloon. From a ridge he could see Hale's men, rifles leaning casually against the walls, guards drifting back and forth. Their complacency was almost insulting, given all they had done to manipulate the land and the people. "Remember," she whispered, "they are dangerous, but they are not invincible. Timing is everything." They descended carefully, using the shadows and crumbling walls for cover. The first arrow flew silently, striking a lookout before he could sound the alarm. Then the cowboy fired, precise and controlled, cutting off another sentry. Chaos spread slowly at first, then like wildfire. Hale's men scrambled, disoriented, their plan unraveling as the group pressed forward. The firefight was intense, but calculated. Every member of the hidden camp played a part. Arrows from the ridge, flanking movements through back alleys, and quick disarming of men who underestimated them. Hale tried to regroup, shouting orders, but the precision and unity of their attack left him vulnerable. The sheriff's authority, once unquestioned, crumbled under the weight of truth and determination. Clay appeared suddenly, gun raised, moving to defend Hale, but the cowboy anticipated his move. They faced each other across the street, rain slick and muddy, tension coiling between them like a spring ready to snap. One shot, and everything would change, but before the trigger was pulled, the Apache beauty intervened, her arrow knocking Clay's gun aside. He stumbled, and the cowboy restrained him, hand on the man's shoulder, eyes steady. "Your lies end here," the cowboy said. Clay's mouth opened, then closed, no words coming. He realized finally that the power he had relied on for years, fear and deception, was gone. Hale's figure emerged from the shadows, his face pale and rigid. The cowboy and the woman approached together, the others standing firm behind them. Hale's eyes darted to the faces he had once controlled, now resolute and fearless. For the first time he saw not just the people he had wronged but the truth he had tried to bury. "You," Hale began, voice shaking. This isn't justice. You can't. Justice isn't waiting for permission," the cowboy interrupted. "It's claiming what's right, for those who were silenced and forgotten." The sheriff looked around, realizing the web of lies had collapsed around him. He had counted on fear to maintain control, but no one here feared him anymore. The power had shifted, and with it, the balance of the town, the land, and the people who had been its rightful stewards. The aftermath was quiet but firm. Clay and Hale were taken into custody by those who remained loyal to the truth. The hidden Apache survivors returned to their camp, their faces calm, though still wary. Children laughed quietly near the riverbank for the first time in years. And in the heart of the canyon, the cowboy and the Apache beauty finally allowed themselves to pause, to breathe. They walked together to the river, the place where memories of childhood met the clarity of the present. Water ran clear and cold, washing over their hands and feet. He looked at her, taking in the years, the battles, the pain, and the resilience that had defined her. "You kept your promise," he said softly, "even when I didn't understand." "And you came back," she replied. "Even when the land, even when everyone told you not to." They shared a long look, one that spoke of survival, of forgiveness, and of a future they could shape together. Words weren't needed. The river, the wind, and the land itself seemed to speak for them. Dry Creek, once a ghost town filled with secrets and lies, began to feel alive again. Survivors rebuilt in small ways, preserving memories while forging new paths. The story of the raid, the betrayals, and the fight for justice would be told and remembered. And though the scars of the past remained, they no longer defined the present. The cowboy and the Apache beauty stood together, watching the sun climb higher, painting the canyon walls gold. They had found the truth. They had survived the lies. And they had each other. As the river flowed steadily past them, he realized that life, like the land, could heal, slowly, but surely. And though danger might return, though storms might come again, they had learned to face it together. The canyon echoed with quiet triumph, the whisper of the wind carrying the story of courage, love, and justice across the plains. The past had been confronted, the present claimed, and the future, though uncertain, was theirs to shape. And with that, the cowboy finally understood that coming home wasn't about returning to the place he left. It was about reclaiming the truth, standing beside the woman he had always loved, and honoring the land that had borne witness to it all. The wind swept across the plains one last time, carrying with it the promise of peace, of memory preserved, and of hearts finally unburdened. The storm had passed, but the lessons it left behind would endure forever.